Gosling in now. And we are ready when you are, Chair.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody, and you're very welcome to today's Licensing Subcommittee hearing, Wednesday the 18th of January. My first task is to deal with the election of chairman. As the presiding person and chair of the Licensing Committee, I ask please for any nominations for chairman of this morning's subcommittee. Members?
Councillor Johnson here. I'm happy to nominate Councillor Butt, yourself, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson, may I have a seconder, please?
I'm quite happy to second that. Thank you, Jude.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. So moving on then to housekeeping, I'll ask our clerk, Mrs. Cutler, if she'd kindly take us through that. Thank you, Mrs. Cutler.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. I should point out that we're not actually being live streamed this morning. It's being recorded internally and will be uploaded after the meeting. That's due to some technical issues this morning. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present please follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the chairman. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Please ensure that you unmute yourself and always turn on the video function before speaking. Please mute your microphone when you are not talking. After each party has made their representation, the chairman will ask each person in turn if they have any questions or comments. However, if at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise your hand function at the top right of the screen. Finally, please can we ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now move to item 2, which is apologies. We have no apologies. And then declarations of interest. I will ask in turn each member if they have any declaration of interest. Councillor Johnson, any declaration of interest?
No declarations, Chair.
And Councillor Burton, any declarations of interest?
None for me, Chair.
Thank you very much. And for completeness, I have no declarations of interest either. Move now to item 4, protocol for public speaking, which is as outlined on your agenda sheet. So you will all have a copy. So moving on then to the substantive, which is Christchurch Road Stores, Bournemouth. An application for a new licence has been received for the premises known as Christchurch Road Stores, 62 Old Christchurch Road, Bournemouth, BH1 1LL. However, the applicant has requested that this matter be adjourned due to the personal reasons. All parties to the application have agreed to this, and it is therefore proposed this item be adjourned until the Licensing Subcommittee taking place on the 9th of February 2023. I'd just like to ask, please, do subcommittee members agree to this? Councillor Johnson, are you so content?
I'm content, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Burton, are you so content?
I'm quite happy with that, Chair.
Thank you very much then. So that is so adjourned. So moving on to our next item, substantive, is Sunset Beach at Aruba Pier Approach, Bournemouth. And an application for a new premise licence has been received for the premises known as Sunset Beach at Aruba Pier Approach, Bournemouth, BH2 5AA. I would just like actually to go back and thank Mrs. Rogers for attending with regard to the previous substantive. My apologies, Mrs. Rogers, I forgot to thank you for your attention as licensing officer, and look forward to you dealing with the matter at the adjourned date. So now to introduce ourselves to you, my name is Councillor Jude Butt and I'm chairman of the Licensing Committee and I'm chairman of this subcommittee for the purposes of today's business. And my ward is Creekmore, Hilbourne and Waterloo. Councillor Johnson, if you'd like to introduce yourself, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Toby Johnson, Vice Chair of the Licensing Committee, member of this subcommittee, and my ward is Alderney and Vaughan Valley.
Very much. And Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Richard Burton. My ward is Bearwood and Murley, and I'm also a member of this subcommittee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. And we have today with us Councillor George Farquhar and Councillor Lawrence Williams, who are reserve members. Mercifully, they're not required today, but if you wish to stay to observe the meeting, you are very, very welcome. Then on to our officers, Mrs. Jardim.
Good morning, Chair. So it's Tanya Jardine, Licensing Officer, and dealing with the application.
Thank you, Mrs. Cole.
Good morning. It's Linda Cole, Solicitor, the legal advisor to the subcommittee this morning.
Thank you. We've already met Mrs. Cutler, but please do introduce yourself.
Good morning, I'm Michelle Cutler and I'm the clerk to the Licensing Subcommittee today.
Thank you. Mrs. Palmer?
Can you unmute your please? Good morning, Ma'am. Julia Palmer, solicitor representing the applicant today.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Boyban, have I pronounced that correctly?
Chair, it's actually Piervan, but it's fine. I've had
Piervan.
multiple variations during my lifetime. It's fine.
Oh, yeah, I'll get that correct.
I'm representing Aruba, obviously, application for DPS for the site.
Thank you very much. And then we have Sergeant Gosling.
Good morning, Chair. Apologies for the technical issues this morning.
There we are. And
I do apologise for that. It's Gareth Gosling. I'm the sergeant responsible for the drug and alcohol harm reduction team for Dorset Police.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Gosling. And we have Vanessa Rosales. Mrs. Rosales.
Good morning, Chair. Vanessa Rosales, a Bournemouth Police Licensing Officer that deals with Bournemouth Central. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, you're all very welcome. So I just check now that everybody who has given notice of their intention to speak has been identified, and anybody who wishes to withdraw a representation or wishes not to speak to show a hand now or indicate in some fashion. I'm seeing nothing, so I will take it that you are all content. So the proposed procedure for today's hearing is as follows. The licensing officer will present her report. The applicant will make their application. There'll be questions of the applicant by all parties, and members of the committee will be going first. The responsible authorities, we have no other persons, will be making their representations. Questions of the responsible authorities will then be taken, and members of the committee will go first. All parties will then be given an opportunity to sum up, and the party who spoke last will go first. I will then conclude the hearing, and the subcommittee will deliberate in private with our legal advisor and our clerk present. Notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations, which is today, Wednesday, the 18th of January. And the notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate, and I shall ask our legal advisor to advise at that moment. So I'd just like now confirmation that we're all content with the proposed procedure, or not, as the case may be. So, Mrs. Palmer, are you so content?
I am indeed, Ma'am. Thank you.
And Mr. Piervan, are you content?
I am indeed.
Thank you. Sergeant Gosling, are you content?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mrs. Rosales, are you content?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
And Mrs. Jardim, are you content?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Mrs. Cole, are you content?
I am, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then finally, just a little note. I'd just like to remind everyone, all parties speaking, not to repeat the information which they've already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations. And all questions to be asked through the chair, please, and there'll be no cross-examination with parties. So that said, if everybody is content and ready, we'll begin the proceedings, and I'll ask our licensing officer, please, Mrs. Jardim, to present her report. Mrs. Jardim, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So the application before you today is to consider whether to grant a new premises licence at Lot 1, situated on the east side of Bournemouth Pier at Pier Approach. The application is to permit plays, films, live and recorded music, performance of dance and supply of alcohol and on and off the premises, Monday to Sunday, 1000 to 2300 hours, and late night refreshment, Monday to Sunday, 23 to 0500 hours. The licence is applied for a limited period from the 1st of April to the 30th of September from 2023 until 2028, being a 5-year period when the licence shall only be used during those months. The site already benefits from a premises licence held in the name of BCP Council, which permits the same activities as applied for by Aruba Limited, except that the supply of alcohol under that licence is only permitted for on sales and has operated as a beach restaurant for several summer seasons. The current application was prompted following previous discussions with Dorset Police about the viability of the business operating under a restaurant licence. During discussions, a variation of the licence held by BCP Council was considered. However, it was decided that applying for a new licence was the best option. The licensing office received one representation against the application, and this is from Dorset Police, on the grounds that granting the application would undermine the prevention of crime and disorder and public safety licensing objectives. During the consultation period, the applicant's solicitor, Mrs. Julia Palmer, and Dorset Police engaged in various discussions, as members will note from the supplementary documentation. In order to address some concerns raised by Dorset Police, the applicant has offered to reduce the terminal hour for licensing activities to 2200 hours Sunday to Wednesday and to 2230 hours Thursday to Saturday, and on non-standard timings to add in brackets and until 22:30 on bank holiday Sundays and during the Air Festival. In addition, following proposals from Dorset Police with regard to conditions, the applicant has provided further proposals which members would have had sight of as part of the supplementary documentation provided by Mrs. Palmer. Despite amendments proposed by the applicant, Dorset Police and the applicant have not been able to agree on the terminal hours for licensable activities until 22:30 on Thursday to Saturday and in non-standard timings, as well as the request for off sales and there being no restaurant-style conditions. We received no other representations from any other responsible authorities, and our members are asked to consider whether to grant this application, and should the licence be granted and the applicants fail to operate in accordance with their licence and any conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any responsible authorities or other persons may request a review of the licence at any time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jardim. So members, are there any points of fact for Mrs. Jardim with regard to her presentation? Councillor Johnson?
No questions on fact, no, thank you.
Councillor Burton?
Likewise for me, no questions on facts, Chair.
Thank you very much. I just want to be absolutely clear. I know it's in the paper, but if you could just state for us, and we can just make a note so we keep it in our minds, of the three outstanding points of non-agreement which you've just actually iterated. If you could repeat those, Mrs. Jardim, that would be very useful. You're on mute, Mrs. Jardim.
Sorry about that. Have it. Okay, so the one is the terminal hour for licensable activities until 22:30 on Thursday to Saturday, and non-standard timings also.
For licensing activity, yes, and the second?
The request for off sales.
Yes.
And there being no restaurant style conditions.
And that there be no restaurant style conditions. That's very useful. That just really crystallises the issues which we have before us today. Thank you very much. Are there any questions on points of fact from you, Mrs. Palmer?
Yes, ma'am. May I just firstly thank Ms. Jardim for managing to catch up with all the alterations and to identify the changes. The only other change that was made is that we voluntarily removed the licensable activity of late night refreshment, so there is no late night refreshment request. Thank you, Mum.
Yes, and we actually very clear in that, but thank you for reiterating that. That's very useful, Mrs. Palmer. Thank you. Sergeant Gosling, do you have any questions on points of fact for Mrs. Jardim?
Nothing from me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And Mrs. Rosales, do you have any questions on points of fact?
Not from me, Chair. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much. So your opportunity now, Mrs. Palmer, on behalf of your client, the applicant, to put forward your case, and you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mum. Mum, as you will be aware, the council proved extremely forward-thinking and innovative in 2021 in its various responses to the COVID pandemic. And one of its initiatives, and that assisted both the badly beleaguered hospitality industry and also to try and harness the impact of the popularity of the beaches when restrictions were eased, was the beach clubs. Following through paragraph 6.6 of your policy, the council obtained a premises licence to cover the 3 lots that were included in that area on the beach. And that licence is in your agenda pack at page 63 onwards. There was liaison with the police, as I understand it, at the time, who did have some reservations about a licence on the beach. And I also understand that the conditions on the licence reflect the agreement that was made with the police. The operation has been going for 2 years, as you have heard, and one of those lots, lot 1, which is identified in your pack, was given to Aruba Limited, and Matt Pearvin, whom you've met, was the DPS there and took charge of the operation here. He's also DPS at the West Beach and has been for many years, so a very experienced operator who is also familiar with how to operate on the beach as opposed to just within premises, because West Beach has long had a successful external deck area operating for many years. The premises licence at West Beach does not restrict any of its activities either to restaurant conditions, nor does it have a restriction on off sales, except that it will only allow off sales to 2 persons at a time. And it is that condition that was repeated in our offer to you, but we have cider and beers and lagers sold to 5.5%. So Sunset Beach was operated in a well-controlled and responsible manner by Matt in 2021 and again in 2022. I'm advised that throughout the time of operation, there were no police call-outs related to the operation itself. 2022 saw some considerable changes to the way the country was moving, and it resulted in a drop in customer footfall, customer expectations and requirements as the COVID restrictions were fully lifted changed, but the pound in their pockets fell considerably in value. Coupled with that was dramatic cost increase and staffing issues hitting the hospitality sector. And whilst the beach clubs, which were very popular, continued to add to the vibrancy and diversity of attraction, their viability came into question. And I understand that the beach hut, which was before the end of the season, when Lot 1, trading in Sunset Beach, saw how things were going, they approached the police in the summer to see if there was any way that the particularly the restaurant condition could be lifted. That was proving very unpopular with customers because the type of casual dining which the beach club was offering was not genuinely conducive, particularly in the open during the day as well as in the evening, to people wanting to have a full meal, and for any drink, any alcoholic drink that they had, to be ancillary to that meal. And so they were getting quite a few people coming in hoping for a drink, but having to be turned away. That restriction, together with the restriction on off licenses, did not apply during the Air Festival. The license allowed for those restrictions to be lifted then. The police did suggest during the meeting that a variation of the current license be applied for. And as you quite rightly asked, Mum, I'm not going to rehearse everything, but the first 2 paragraphs of the email of 13th January at page 3 of the supplementary papers explains the issue around the variation. and how we are here today with the conditions before you today. And Mum, I'm grateful to you for identifying the 3 issues that I agree are the only issues outstanding. I'll start with the additional 30 minutes for alcohol sales. The previous licence, you will note, allowed all the other activities to 11 p.m, but alcohol was limited to 10 p.m, except during the Air Festival. We're asking for an uplift of 30 minutes, as you've heard, Thursdays to Sundays, Thursday to Saturdays, bank holiday Sundays, and Air Festival. This is actually 30 minutes less during the Air Festival than was allowed on the previous application. These are still very modest hours and end earlier than most licensed premises, certainly the other licensed premises in the vicinity. Off sales, as I've said, we've asked for those to be limited in the same way as West Beach, but with the added condition concerning the alcohol by volume percentage. As indicated in the application, the operators are aware that people wanting to drink on the beach can very easily get alcohol from the off-licensed facilities nearby in the town. My clients believe that the controls they will exert over sales and the higher prices that they will charge will help to reduce the potential of crime and disorder as a result of such drinking. Sunset Beach was not advised of any incidents arising out of the relaxations, which included the ability to have off sales unrestricted during the Air Festival as a result of the Air Festival being carried out. So they were allowed to be free of the restaurant condition. They were allowed to be free of off license during the Air Festival. And there were no reports in the 2 years that they had that benefit of there being an issue as a result. So with regard to the restaurant condition, this is probably the most, it's the nub of the issue, I would say, Mum. It's a particularly anachronistic condition. In the 1964 Act, you may be aware that it was a specific condition that was applied to licenses in a strict format, very much as the format you've got now. The 2003 Act recognised that then it was becoming anachronistic and it scrapped it. But nonetheless, it's a condition here. It does not really suit the main customer base of today, especially, as I say, in casual dining operations of this nature. And a considerable amount of trade, as I've said, was lost as a result. With regard to the police representation, Police Sergeant Gosling was aware that an application was going to be made in respect of the 2023 operation and the reasons why. This arose from the meeting in the earlier year, and also Matt was meeting with him from time to time on other issues and mentioned the fact that the application was going in. He was asked to notify him when it went in, and he did. And I also sent the email that you have, specifically sending him the application and the conditions and inviting any response he may care to make. It will be noted that the amended application details and conditions filed as a result of the supplemental information that we received on the 10th of January have included the conditions that we were asked to agree in that supplement. There were 4 additional points, you will be aware. They're on pages 92 and 93 of your papers. The application refers to the effective continued use of Lot 1 under the council licence, and there has never been any intention to use it as a festival site. To make this quite clear, condition 2.4 has been offered, and that's on page 10 of your supplemental papers. The police concerns are expressed specifically on page 93 of your main report, and it is appreciated and accepted in the extensive controls and conditions that we have offered that the beach is a sensitive area. It always has been, and I'm afraid it always will be during the busy summer period in particular. Especially in the evenings, the area under the pier can cause concern, being used for undesirable activities. One of the keys to deterring such undesirable use and behaviour is light and the nearby presence of good operators. There is clear visibility of the under pier area from the beach club, including during the evening, and the presence of staff on site and SIA security deters undesirable activity. That was noticed during the last couple of years, and contrary to police fears, my clients believe that if they are permitted to continue to operate their usual tight ship here, which will include controlling customers' behaviour and the sale of alcohol to them, be that on or off the premises, it will in fact be a positive benefit to the area, as it has been for the past 2 years, including in the control of crime and disorder issues. The police very clearly set out, and I'm grateful to them for the very clear way that they responded in their supplemental information, on pages 94 and 95, with 5 available outcomes of their representations. And of those 5, we are inviting you to please consider 2. And we are inviting you to please grant on modified conditions, and those conditions are on pages 10 to 12 of the supplemental papers, and to exclude the licensable activity of late night refreshment. We endorse the comments made by Police Sergeant Gosling to guidance on page 94 when he refers to tailoring and proportionality of conditions. The quote, ma'am, you will recognise as coming from actually paragraph 8.7 of your policy, and that's expanded at 8.23 of your policy, and it reflects paragraph 10.10 of government guidance. We believe that the conditions now before you meet fully with these provisions. We fully endorse the affirmative comments made by the police under the heading "Refuse the application" on page 95, and stress that the applicant has indeed clearly demonstrated that this operation, if permitted as requested, has not in the past and will not in the future lead to additional demand on police resources, and positively shows that the premises licence holder can and will uphold the licensing objectives. You have additionally with your papers the substantial controls properly offered in the event management plan, the EMP, at pages 20 to 60 of our supplemental papers. For an outlet with a capacity of only 240, I would respectfully submit that this EMP, coupled with the conditions offered, probably results in one of the most strictly and fully controlled operations in the town. Controls on many licensed premises for high-density vertical drinking establishments, for large entertainment licenses and late-night venues, which generally exercise the police, are far less restrictive. This is not a new and untried operation coming to you with these proposals. This team has operated this venue without incident for the last 2 years, as well as having been involved in the running of both West Beach and Aruba for many years. I accept that the police may put the good operation down to the restaurant condition curtailing their activities, but you will no doubt be aware of the difficulties that staff have had to face on a very regular basis, turning people away because they did not want to have a table meal to enjoy a drink, and the displeasure made quite clear by some of those people. But they did it, and they did it well. Ma'am, I'll reserve my closing comments for an address after the police have given their address, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Palmer. You'll have your opportunity to sum up at the end of proceedings. I'm just going to put the light on. It's got awfully dark in here. Okay, forgive me. I live out in the sticks a little, and when it gets dark, it gets very dark. Thank you very much, Mrs. Palmer, for your presentation. So now we have questions of the applicant by all parties. So members, any questions for Mrs. Palmer with regard to her submission? Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. No, it was just one question really regarding the removal of that nighttime offer. How pivotal was that to your original thinking when it came to applying for this particular license? Was it the main reason for applying to try and get that late night refreshment, or were you more looking for what is now being applied to, and that was going to be a fortunate bonus if you were able to obtain that license?
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Mrs. Palmer?
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. As you will appreciate, what we were trying to do is initially, because of the request for a variation, was to replicate the licence that was already there, which did have late night refreshment. It was not our specific wish to use that. We were just replicating it, and as you quite rightly say, taking advantage of the facility that had been made available before should we need it. It was not fundamental to our application.
So useful to know. Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson, secondary or any other question?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do feel free to come back in at any stage. Councillor Burton, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just so I can get clear in my head about the off sales aspect of this. I mean, I think I can picture it, but how do you perceive the off sales part working at the moment? Correct me if I'm wrong. If without it, any drinks bought will have to be drunk within the premises. For off sales, they'll be able to go out of the boundary, i.e. onto the rest of the beach. Will the price of drinks be the same on sale or off sale? I noticed about things being sold not in glass containers. How would that work with an off sale?
There's quite a few questions in there. If you could please give an explanation as to that. Thank you, Mrs. Palmer.
Thank you, Ma'am. I'm going to ask Mr. Pearvan to deal with this as it's operational.
Thank you, Mr. Pearvan.
Thank you. So the facility would be done both ways. So at West Beach, for example, we have a separate off-sale hatch so that we can maintain a separate element to the customers inside the venues. So we operate both ways. That has a separate sort of security on as well, just to keep an eye on it. Everything is in disposables that goes onto the beach for obvious reasons. We don't want any glass going out. Everything is single serve, so no bottles are going out as well. And obviously it's 2 drinks per person, and then we operate challenge 25 on our takeaway as well to ensure that we're not serving minors.
And can you comment on price, please?
Price point, we run exactly the same as we would inside the venue. So if it's £6 a pint in the venue, it's £6 takeaway. There's no reduction. It's not about cheap drinks to take on the beach. It's about maintaining our margins.
Okay, thank you for that. Did you want a supplementary, Councillor Burton?
Yeah, I'm just still trying. I'm picturing. I think I've got the picture now. But any drinks sold on off sale will still be in disposable containers, and therefore they'll be just going out onto the beach. Anything sold within the premises, you are responsible for the cleaning up and of disposable. How does that affect off sales on the beach?
In the venue itself, we run fully polycarbonate, so it makes it quite easy to identify off sales and on sales. Also, less wastage going into the environment, so we do polycarb for wash up. Onto the beach, we trialed previously the disposable ones, but we go recycling in terms of plastic. We have looked at paper as well, but it's.
How do you clean up after?
We maintain sort of 5 meters around our area is what we sort of agree with West Beach. Anything past that outside the area is quite hard to control, if I'm honest, on that front.
Okay, so out of that, then you maintain 5 meters around the perimeter of the plan that you sent us. Is that correct?
Yes. Obviously identifying our waste that may be there.
And there's no glass that goes out onto the beach. It's all plastic or polycarbonate or whatever. Yeah.
Plastic or paper, yes.
Yeah, okay. Right, well, if you want to investigate that further as we go along, Councillor Burton, and I do see the angle you're coming from, please do feel free to raise those questions. I have quite a few questions, but if either Councillor Johnson or Councillor Burton wish to come in, then please just do put your hands up. So we've had your presentation, Mrs. Palmer, very expansive as always. Just, I suppose, the simple question that we are dealing with these 3 main outstanding areas of terminal hours, licensing activity, request off sales and no restaurant style conditions. Do you feel that all the other matters have been overcome? I will be asking Sergeant Gosling the same question.
I very much hope so, ma'am, but I've not had direct communication with Sergeant Gosling.
That was my question. You've had no direct indication because things did break down a little bit somewhat, didn't they? The mediation didn't quite take place as we would expect, but I'll ask Sergeant Gosling as to why that was the case, and could you perhaps answer why the mediation wasn't as successful as it usually is in these circumstances? Thank you, Mrs. Palmer.
Sorry, ma'am. Asking me the same question you're going to ask Sergeant Gosling about the mediation.
Yes, mediation, and just why was it that it wasn't as successful? Because usually something like this, where we are now, we're so very close to finding a resolution. We're not there yet, obviously, but the mediation did seem to break down. We just wondered why that was the case, because it's not generally the case between parties. We just wondered what you experienced, and I'll be asking Sergeant Gosling the same question.
I think it was primarily down to time, ma'am, quite honestly, because whilst Sergeant Gosling did put some bullet points in his original representation of 15th December, it wasn't until the 10th of January that we received the details that gave us the ability to properly respond to those. We had, as you know, in our email, invited him to respond if he was anxious about conditions. We didn't have a direct response. All we had was the details from the council of the representation that had been put in. We also noted that when he did put in his response on the 10th, that he was indicating that he would not be available for the next 5 days for the ability to discuss those, no doubt due to other duties and the like. But that did impinge on time, ma'am.
I understand, and obviously the season being Christmas, so the mitigation offered is late. Because obviously of the timeline and perhaps the season, so that's explains that factor. Could you again take us through why a full application was applied for and not a variation with regard to off sales, as perhaps we might expect? Perhaps you could take us through that again, please.
Yes, of course, ma'am. The original licence was granted to a council operative with another council employee being the designated premises supervisor for the whole license, which was then licensed out to the 3 individual operators. There was a change in the way that that was considered to be put out to tender. Also, the DPS was not keen to become involved in an application for variation. We had no right to apply to vary that license because we had no legal interest in it. It was agreed, as I understand it, that any new licenses granted for the beach clubs would be to individual operators, not through the council premises license. And so it would have been necessary to transfer that license in any event. So the only sensible way forward was to make an application for a new license. And as I said, originally, we stuck as closely as we could to the conditions and terms of that original license to give the effect of the variation that had been requested. Although I understand that the variation that was discussed was in slightly different terms to that which we're putting in now in any event. I think that originally during the summer, it was hoped that if a variation application could have been put in very quickly, then there could have been a trial of a small area within the centre of the unit to see how that operated. And that was not possible because, as I say, the DPS at that time did not want to get involved in a variation application, as I understand it, and the summer slipped past and the season came to an end. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it certainly does help because it's always the easiest and quickest route is always the best one to take, and it was just unusual that wasn't taken in that instance. But understanding the legal capacity there is helpful. My next question is, could you confirm what's being offered with regard to the SIA doorman, please, if you can confirm that?
Just turn to the conditions that we offer, ma'am, which are on pages 10 to 12, if I remember rightly, of the additional.
And this is yes, modified conditions, yeah, on supplementary.
That's right, and it's 2.7 on page 10 of the supplementary. So there will be an SIA licensed supervisor on duty when 75 or more customers are on the premises, with a risk assessment being undertaken to increase that during different times of the day and week as necessary. And it's on a risk assessment basis that West Beach deploys its SIA supervisors, and that always works very well. I understand that they can have up to 3 door supervisors if it's at a busy time, but I will ask Matt to just confirm that that's the case.
Yes, the risk assessment essentially is, I suppose, based on the weather as well. You know, a rainy weekend is not going to require probably any SIA, if I'm honest, because there'll be very little attendance at the beach. A sunny weekend, obviously, we would want maximum control and safety in the area, so we would go with sort of 3 door staff. And then supplementary to that, because we have had 4 venues on the beach, we actually had an extra SIA last year that would rove between the 4 sites, so between West Beach, W Beach, Aruba, and Sunset. So we were covered extra as well for our own peace of mind.
So there'll be various factors at any time which will apply, but they'll be risk assessed as appropriate with regard to those specific factors occurring at any time.
Yes,
So
and also any intelligence that comes that there may be a problem with the weekend, we can always add additional facilities very quickly.
Okay. Now, you talked to us about the Air Festival and how there are no restrictions during Air Festival time. So could you explain to us how the ante obviously will be upped during this time and how this is managed, because it's different to the license of which you're holding it for the remainder of the time. So could you take us through how you deal with the Air Festival when you do have off sales?
Essentially not too dissimilar to as we run it as a restaurant. We still don't, during the daytime, offer vertical drinking. We sort of still run it as a venue that if there's no table and no base as such, obviously our bar capacity is based on the number of seats we have around tables. So we still operate the same. It's just that you will have an element of the venue that has less diners and maybe some more people drinking. Again, Air Festival, we actually go to 4 door staff during the day. So we have that extra support, one to sort of manage the off sales, which is located at our front entrance as well anyway. So that the off sales is from the same point of entry where we always have 2 door staff at key times to be able to manage people coming into the venue and the off sales. In the evenings with the Air Festival, we do take it and have DJs and go a little bit more wet led in the evenings. Again, we're still hitting our capacity of 220, 240. But we essentially run it the same as we do with the restaurant. Same conditions, same applications, same health and safety policies, same licensing conditions, apart from the fact that they don't have to have the meal to go with the drink.
Okay, and going back to Councillor Burton's point, this is, as you've advised, run from these kiosks. So it's separate to, that is where the alcohol is indeed sourced, and it's 2 drinks per person, or is that different?
No, this is a condition. The 2 drinks per person is the condition that we've put in this year. Last year, we were free to offer whatever we wanted under the premise license at the time.
So that would still sit for Air Festival. Yes, so that would be at all times, including the Air Festival, 2 drinks per person, and they would be served, as Councillor Burton did raise that question, as to where the supply of alcohol would come from in its specific kiosks. Is that correct?
It's from the same unit that we use for serving.
Unit, whatever you like to call it.
Yeah, well, a container, the same unit that we use for serving as a bar facility for the restaurant. It's from the same unit, so the sale alcohol is in the same location.
But people would attend that unit to buy their drink, as opposed to the drink being taken by a member of staff to somebody at a table.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much. Now you do understand that the EMP, the details, is a matter for the SAG, and although very useful for us, we don't have any influence on what's in there because we don't have the professional capacity, obviously, to make sure. And we're not aware of each individual application as to the risk required. But thank you very much for providing that, because we can see that obviously a huge amount of work has gone into it, and it is fairly substantive. But just to understand that we don't have a professional comment on that, other than it is in place, which is important. Okay, so I'll come back to Councillor Johnson. Councillor Johnson, any further questions?
No, Chair, you've covered everything I was going to that popped into my head. Thank you.
I apologise. Councillor Burton, is there anything you wanted to come back, especially with regard to your question in the supplementary?
No, thank you, Chair. I think I'm quite clear now.
Lovely. Okay, we are all covered. Right, thank you very much. So now an opportunity for Sergeant Gosling. Do you have any questions for Mrs. Palmer? Thank you.
No questions for Mrs. Palmer or Mr. Pearman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. Rosales, do you have any questions for Mrs. Palmer or indeed Mr. Pearman?
Nothing from me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Jardim, do you have any questions for either party?
Nothing from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And now it's opportunity of our responsible authorities, Sergeant Gosling and Vanessa Rosales, to put forward their case. And I take it I've been advised, Sergeant Gosling, that you'll be putting this forward. Is that correct? But if Mrs. Rosales obviously able to come in to assist you in any way appropriate, if you so feel fit. So, Sergeant Gosling, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And firstly, I just want to address the error in the document that I submitted towards the end, as was pointed out by Mrs. Palmer, in respect of not receiving anything from either Mr. Pearman or Mrs. Palmer in respect of this application. That was an error on my part. But yes, we did begin conversations throughout the summer. We sat with council representatives, other responsible authorities to discuss proposed changes to the existing licence. I completely understood, and hopefully Mr. Pearman will agree, that we did look at a variety of different ways in which we could make the licence more viable to change to how everything that was described by Mrs. Palmer in respect of the change of use of the beach. We've gone from no one going to the beach during COVID to then everybody coming to the beach. We seem to be kind of on a bit of a downward slope from that, and I understand why businesses need to adapt to that. However, this is a very sensitive area. That's already been highlighted by Mrs. Palmer. During the real peak busy periods, the period that people enjoy coming to our beach, and so they should, we do experience a huge uplift in demand. I think given the fact that the data that's been presented to you as part of the document is a 12-month snippet, and naturally we'll all be aware that it's barely used during the winter period. It is quite disproportionate during those particular peak periods that we do get that demand, and that's the time that we're most concerned about trying to manage those issues that do arise. The document that I've prepared, and I'm hoping that everybody's had an opportunity to read through that, and I apologise for how detailed it is, but hopefully that reflects quite how sensitive the area is, and I am really keen to try and work conditions, as I was for the previous application, that do reflect those concerns whilst enabling the use of the beach in a commercial fashion. But we can't do that to the detriment or to the undermining of the licensing objectives. Now, I really want to focus on three particular areas, and those being that of the SIA. I think, you know, we are so close in respect of that. I think the only concern I have that remains in respect of that is around the use only of one person, and trying to foresee when the venue will have 75 guests attending, because we know that particularly during the summer we can receive coach loads of people visiting the town. We can receive stag and hen parties. We welcome them to the town, and all of that can be quite difficult to manage. And whilst it's not necessarily a question for how that can be managed, but I just don't think that's easy to foresee at all times. So I would like to see certainly a stricter condition there around SIA that would give us that confidence, particularly during those peak periods, that there would be adequate coverage. And I do respect, and I know that there is coverage throughout the other venues that are managed by Mr. Peovan, but I just need to make sure that we focus on this one to the exclusion of the others. The two other remaining issues there really are around the off sales and in respect of the restaurant style conditions, which I'll deal with the latter first, if that's okay, and that's in respect of the restaurant. We've always promoted, always been happy to have restaurant style venues on the beach. The council have always been keen to have families attend the beach, and for there to be adequate provision for families and people wishing to enjoy the beach in a responsible manner. And it was felt during the initial application, and I know we've moved on from that now, that there would be a risk if it became a wholly alcohol-led set of premises along the beach. And that concern remains. I know that Matt is a good operator. We generally have very low levels of disorder associated with his premises. But we do, you know, where we do have these certain controls in place, certainly for sensitive areas, we do feel that that does have an impact on reducing the crime and disorder, as it has done. So removing that condition, and we did talk about options during the summer, certainly options around having particular areas of the site that might be for use by people enjoying pre-meal drinks, or perhaps sort of post-meal drinks, an area of bar where people could do that, but that would maintain a restaurant type feel, because it was certainly felt that, and I understood personally, that you wouldn't it was quite difficult for the venue to manage people sat at a table. Simply, you can't order a drink until you've ordered food. So we did talk about that, but haven't made any further headway on that. And I think it was considered to be quite a difficult thing to manage format. So that really illustrates my efforts to try and move forward and support the operators as much as possible. I think the complete removal of the license of the restaurant style conditions will inevitably lead to the venue, the operator, or the location being considered a beach bar rather than a beach restaurant. And I think that's something that we need to be really cautious about. We do have a family friendly beach. We are well known for having a family friendly beach in Bournemouth. And I do see that as moving on a sort of fairly slippery slope towards having lots and lots of bars, vertical drinking on the beach, which does cause me concern. And then secondly, I think the biggest concern for me, and I know that Mrs. Palmer did highlight the restaurant style conditions as being the biggest concern, but I think the biggest concern to us is certainly the off sales element. So trying to control, as Mr. Pearson has said, it is difficult to control whether it be waste or whether it be consumption of alcohol. It's difficult to do that beyond a certain distance from the site. And I'm grateful for Matt for highlighting that, you know, certainly from a litter point of view, they consider 5 meters. It is difficult. And I think if you did draw a big circle around that, 5 meters is quite a big area. And it is difficult to control it beyond then. And I think that's where our concerns lie in respect of the off sales of alcohol. I'm grateful for the efforts of Mrs. Palmer and Mr. Pearson for trying to mitigate that concern and that risk by limiting drinks to 2 per person. But I hope that the committee will understand that concerns do remain around who is consuming that alcohol. The fact that those guests coming and queuing for alcohol and buying 2 at a time, they can do so several times should they wish, as they can in any bar. So it only really has a limited effect, albeit I know that the staff would be instructed to be aware of who, you know, repeat customers and the usual things that would apply to a licensed premises. But on a really busy beach, that can be quite difficult to manage. There is, and I'm grateful for Mrs. Palmer for highlighting the concern around off sales from local convenience stores, supermarkets, etc. I do know that that's a huge problem for us in Bournemouth and on the beach. The availability of relatively cheap alcohol from off licenses is a massive concern for us. It's a very difficult thing for us to police, given the numbers of people that engage in that type of activity of buying bulk quantities of alcohol. But I do take issue with the fact that introducing further relatively uncontrolled alcohol onto the beach, and I do say that term very carefully, but you know, it is relatively uncontrolled, because I know at the point of sale it will be controlled by Matt and his team. But once it leaves that curtilage, once it goes out onto the beach, that really is a concern. And I don't think that will necessarily help the concerns that we have in respect of off licenses. It will naturally sort of encourage people to drink alcohol at a higher price point. I do, you know, see the benefits in that, where they then will be perhaps less inclined to drink more. But my concern is that those engaging in you know, getting essentially intoxicated on cheap alcohol may then be tempted to turn to readily available alcohol, regardless of the cost, because we do make silly decisions when we've had a few drinks. And they will be looking to do that as an alternative, perhaps when they do run dry of their off sales alcohol from elsewhere. So I think it is. I'd ask you to exercise caution, certainly in considering this provision as a means of reducing crime and disorder. The premises itself, operating up till now, has been really good. Really sort of no huge complaints from me in that regard. But certainly in respect of these changes, we continue to have concerns, unfortunately. I won't repeat anything that's in the document. You've had the opportunity, hopefully, to consider that, and I invite any questions that you might have in relation to either information in the document or anything that I might have said this morning.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Gosling. Members, Councillor Burton, any questions for Sergeant Gosling?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the heat map, Sergeant Gosling, which is quite interesting, and the colours. I can't see any where it says what the colours to numbers. Can you give us some ideas? The dark reddy orange colour. How many numbers of incidents that refers to?
It's in respect of the numbers, they can be broken down into quite significant detail with regards to the types of crime, etc. Certainly, I think more detail. Well, certainly more detail than I've got now, and I don't have any numbers with me, unfortunately, so I can't assist you with that. What we try and do with the heat maps is it's a way in which we like to target our resources. So that's the purpose of these type of documents, is to really demonstrate where our resources are taken up during any particular period in time. It's quite a complex system to get into and to put the data in that I need. So unfortunately, I won't have that information for you here and now, I'm afraid.
Well, it was only order of magnitude I was thinking about, not very specific data. I was just trying to see, is red 10 or 1,000, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's not going to be. We're not looking at into the thousands. We're looking. It'll be in the tens. I would expect for the majority of the areas. And again, these figures will fluctuate throughout the year. So that heat map will very much change. If you were to ask for, January, this month, it would show next to nothing along the beach. So it's really, really difficult, and I'm always reluctant to provide lots and lots of maps of different times of the year, because you can get baffled by them quite easily, and certainly I do. And I've looked at them for many years. They do get very confusing. So I felt it was useful to put it in there to give a context of, the fact that really we do get disorder and we do get crimes reported on the beach. And that's largely due just to how busy it is. When you do get a lot of people come along to anything, you will see an increase, because there are going to be a certain minority, usually, of people that are intent on causing disorder or committing crime. The beach, as we know, is absolutely packed, and in particular this area of the beach. BCP Council have worked really hard to try and disperse people further along the beaches, and I think that continues to be an objective for them. But there is still, a huge number, and I'm sure that Mr. Peovan will agree that there are still that number of people that are absolutely intent on walking down through the gardens, coming straight onto the beach and putting their towels out, at the first sign of a piece of sand, rather than moving along the beach. That density of people does lead to more disorder than it does elsewhere on the beach.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully that helps and provides a bit of context for you.
I think there might be a further one in there, which I think Councillor Burton might be trying to get at, is in terms of what can be traced back with regard to the incidents on that hotspot directly to Aruba, I think, which is more pertinent perhaps, and you will be familiar with those figures. We obviously aren't, and we don't know what the actual key is to that. But are there any which spring to mind which you can tell us that link directly back to Aruba, which is obviously our concern?
Absolutely not. I mean, Aruba itself as a self-contained late night venue, really. It does operate during the day as well, but we don't get a great deal of issues from Aruba or West Beach. There is always a wider effect that's more difficult to to measure in respect, certainly, of when people leave. It's really, really difficult for us to associate any disorder to any particular premises there. But no, as I've already stated in my submission, these premises are generally well operated. But the fact that we continue to have these concerns around these particular areas, I think they're the issues that have led to us being able to agree.
So your concern is with exacerbation, but there's no cumulative impact area there. So it's the exacerbation is your concern.
Exactly that. Yes, thank you.
Councillor Burton, any further questions or anything else you'd like to ask? I jumped in there, but I think that's what you were getting at.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that sort of covers mine. And just one point, I'm just going to turn my camera off for a second. My dog's decided it's too cold in here, wants to leave the room, so I'll be back in a second.
Oh, indeed. We'll wait for you, Councillor Burton. Please, you go and see to your dog. There's not a problem at all. Just allow. In fact, the postman arrived and all hell let loose, so I had to turn the mic off and pretend that they weren't screaming in my ear. So we'll just allow Councillor Burton time to see to his animals. The vagaries of remote meetings. You shouldn't be too long.
There we go, he's back.
I am back.
All is well, Councillor Burton. Thank you very much. So thank you for that. I'll always come back to you if you need me to, Councillor Burton. So Councillor Johnson, do you have any questions?
Yes, Chair. Just one. It's regarding that higher price and the off sales. As someone who has, to my shame, enjoyed one or two merry barbecues on that beach during my student days, I would say that the people who are normally going down there with pre-bought alcohol, they very rarely bring too little for obvious reasons. And regarding the price here, given that 200 yards up through the central gardens, you have a venue that's charging probably half the price. Would you not agree that it's much more likely that they will go somewhere else for that at that point, or into Aruba itself? The off sales being from a separate thing and only providing 2 per person seems like it would force them to go elsewhere anyway. What controls would you like to see on that off sales if you were to have that option, or do you not see any real suitable alternative to just removing that off sales offering altogether?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, you gave me to answer, Chair.
Absolutely, Sergeant Gosling, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Councillor. I agree with everything that you've said there. There is certainly patterns of behaviour that we see in relation to people bringing alcohol down onto the beach. It's the ready availability of that alcohol to continue up until late evening. It's not a late night offering that's being proposed, but that off sales element that lacks that control beyond the curtilage of the premises, that leads to that whole wider area being essentially a dare I say, and I don't wish to cheapen it, but it essentially becomes a pub beer garden, because in what a wonderful view and environment that they will have for that. The concern that we have is that it becomes a destination, not for people wishing to enjoy the beach, but a known destination for somewhere where you can go and have a few drinks, a few more drinks if you wish, and for that alcohol element to be more and more of a focus.
Okay, thank you. I'm just actually going to thank you, Councillor Johnson. Is there anything else you'd like to ask at this moment?
No, Chair, that was a good answer. Thank you.
I'm actually just going to pop back to Mrs. Palmer, if I may, for a point of clarification before I ask a question of your good self, Sergeant Gosling. Can you explain, please, give the definition of no restaurant style conditions? I need clarification on this before I ask Sergeant Gosling a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. A restaurant condition is pretty much as is currently on the licence, which is alcohol being ancillary to a table meal.
I understand ancillary to a table meal, but the way in which I'm hearing conversations is there any intention to remove that restaurant offer and just have wet service?
No, ma'am, there isn't. And having heard Police Sergeant Gosling's concern, and I'm grateful to him once again for outlining it so in such detail, my clients would be very happy to offer an additional condition that the premises will offer substantial food throughout its opening hours, with orders taken until 30 minutes before its terminal hour. So keeping the focus on the food.
I think that is a great concern, and if you're so willing to offer that condition, the subcommittee will be so minded to consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's very helpful. Sergeant Gosling, I've actually had my question answered now, so and I think you've also had some information given to you for your consideration. But I did ask the question of Mrs. Palmer with regard to the mediation. I'm probably going to get the same answer as to why that wasn't as successful as it could have been, but I have asked it of the applicant, so I feel it only fair to ask it of your good self. Could you explain what you feel happened? Because you are rather extraordinary in your mediation, and we're always extremely grateful for the hard work that you do put in with all applicants when necessary. So what did happen this time? Thank you, Sergeant Gosling.
So it is largely similar to the reasons as outlined by Mrs. Palmer, but there are some other factors as well that Mrs. Palmer won't be aware of, and they're external to this application. So one factor being the festive break. That was a significant factor for us, I think. But also we've got, without wishing to go into them in any detail, but we've got a number of other competing licensing matters that are ongoing at the moment, which have taken up a great deal more of our time than we hoped. It was really largely down to timing and misfortune.
That's as I said, that mirrors the explanation given by Mrs. Palmer, which is absolutely fine. So could I be advised with regard to where you feel the off sales being an issue? Do you feel that the off sales will be an issue at all times if we were so disposed to grant these off sales, or do you feel it would be more of a problem, towards the later time of the day, 10 to 10:30? What are your concerns? Is it that it's just a blanket trouble, or that there is a specific time where there may be deeper concerns?
Thank you, Chair. I would say that had this been a town centre premises, then it may well be that off sales become more of an issue during the late evening, sort of the early hours of the morning. And I don't think that would be a surprise to anyone here. But we are talking about a site that is busy during, it's more seasonal related. So it is very busy during the summer months. And as Mr. Pearvan has said, has very little footfall during other times. If the weather is poor or it's outside of the school holidays, then that is a time that it would present far less of a risk. But the times when I think Mr. Pearvan is looking to maximise, to make, understandably, during the peak summer periods, and that really starts from early in the morning through till the terminal hour. I think it would probably be more of an issue during the day than the evening, that there would be an issue, albeit that if this were, and it's been quite difficult to get my head round because of the changes and how certain changes impact on other factors. So, for example, had the restaurant condition remained, then off-license issues wouldn't be so much of a problem later on, because it would always be alongside food, but we're looking to remove that as well. So there's lots of different factors to consider. So in answer to your question, the concern around off sales remains for the whole time, but during those summer periods, that's really when we're talking about it having the biggest impact on us as a police force, and us trying to manage the rest of the demand for the town centre, which is hugely increased during the summer period.
I understand. Now, the request for off sales, that's going to be beyond obviously the curtilage and the licensed area, the premise. So those drinks are going to be taken further. your concerns that sit around that, what is it? Is there anything in there that might mitigate that, where those drinks were not to be taken past that area, the area of which the applicant is responsible for? Would that in any way, what would be your thought processes about that?
I think my thought processes are, I think it's quite, I would almost prefer it if the area of the curtilage was made bigger. That would almost make more sense, and to give a greater area, you know, to be under the control of the operator. But that's something that's outside of the control of everybody here. That's to do with the license from BCP that Mr. Piovan enjoys, because that would then give a greater space for people to enjoy their alcohol and their food, but would stay under the control of the operator. The concern that we have here is that ability to leave the site and therefore to as Mr. Piovan said, reasonably speaking, outside of, I think it was 5 or 10 meters that Mr. Piovan said, that actually it's very difficult to manage that. So you end up with lots of alcohol being dispensed, and it will be an attractive provision. It will be an attractive provision for people to enjoy a beer or a cider or whatever it is they want on the beach. And that's the concern that we have. I think, added to the fact that we've got entertainment attached to this premises, so that, and it does create a vibrant atmosphere, and naturally it should. Hospitality should be vibrant. The concern is that it becomes a wider area, and that you almost do have that. And I know I've alluded to it during the submission, but you can have essentially an ability to have music being enjoyed far outside of the curtilage, and therefore, whilst not within the control of the operator, because they will be outside of the site and they will be on the beach, it's very difficult for Mr. Piovan's team to manage that because they're outside of the licensed premises, but they will nonetheless be able to enjoy that entertainment inside, and any disorder, I would suggest, is attributed if it's alcohol related and they've consumed it from the premises. So it is quite complex, and we've got families intermingled amongst it, and it's quite a difficult thing for everyone to manage.
Indeed. I wondered if I might also again stray a little and ask if Mrs. Palmer has any comment as to that situation. Thank you.
Well, perhaps I could first ask Police Sergeant Gosling a question about the busyness of the beach and the control of the beach during the Air Festival. I anticipate that's probably one of your busiest times of the year. Is that fair on the beach?
What I will do, Mrs. Palmer, is as it's your opportunity in just a moment to actually ask questions.
Sorry,
I will.
I seem to have lost sound.
Who has? Oh, Sergeant Gosling, have you, dear? Can you hear us? That's unfortunate. Sergeant Gosling, I'll keep talking. So you've lost sound and it looks like you've frozen now. No, can you hear us? It's not looking like it. Mrs. Cutler, it looks like Sergeant Gosling has lost sound.
Apologise,
Yes.
I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I can't hear
We can hear
anything
you.
here.
Can you hear
You
us?
can hear me.
Yes.
Right.
We can.
I might have to leave and come back if that's okay.
Oh.
Right.
It's
Okay.
gone.
So we shall just wait just a moment to hopefully get Sergeant Gosling back. I was just saying, Mrs. Palmer, that I believe that members may have exhausted questions at the moment, so I'll be deferring to you, and you would be able to ask that question, which you were just about to put. Thank you. Which I hope will be helpful to the subcommittee as well.
Chair, sorry, do you mind if I leap in? I neglected to ask one of the questions that I had for Sergeant Gosling.
Absolutely, Councillor Johnson. Just to check, Sergeant Gosling, can you hear us?
I am back. Thank you. Sorry
You
about
are
that.
back indeed. So what I will do then, Mrs. Palmer, is I will ask Councillor Johnson to place his question, and then you can place yours when it's your opportunity to raise questions. Councillor Johnson, thank you.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. Yes, no, it's just a quick one for Gareth. I was just reading through the original submission from the police and the chart of condition, the table of conditions and their RAG rating. And I was just confused by a couple. I'm sure there's a simple explanation, but there are a few where the wording of the existing BCP Council conditions and the proposed conditions, the wording doesn't change, and yet the RAG rating changes in a couple of cases from green to yellow, and a couple of cases from yellow to red, or even from green to red. And I was just wondering where that comes from, because if they were acceptable on the previous license, why would they not be acceptable on a new license?
That's an extremely good
absolutely.
question. Thank you for covering that, Councillor Johnson. Sergeant Gosling, if you could assist us, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's broadly speaking, in relation to the question raised earlier by Councillor Butt, it's trying to assess the suitability of those new conditions alongside the new. It's kind of when you're, how do I explain it? If you've got one set of conditions for, even if it's the same premises, it's trying to work out how compatible those conditions are to what's trying to be achieved, because we always try and help the operator to achieve whatever it is they're trying to do. So whether it be a drastic change, a small change, and then we have to revisit what we've got in the existing conditions. So largely it's as a result of that. So it's largely as a result of a change in what it is that's trying to be achieved and the departure from the previous offer or provision. Hopefully that makes some sense.
Is that helpful, Councillor Johnson?
It made sense to me, but I'm not sure I.
No, it does. It does make sense to me. What I'm seeing you're saying is effectively those are changing because of the taking away effectively of the restaurant
Yeah.
conditions. So the necessity is, the necessity is changing. But there
It
are
changes.
a couple. Yeah, I totally understand that. There are a couple though that I think 2.12. 2.12 doesn't particularly seem to have anything to do with the restaurant conditions or table eating and seating and ancillary food. It's just regarding the training of staff. Now the wording hasn't changed at all from the existing to the proposed, but the RAG rate has gone from green to red, and the existing and proposed look fairly similar to what I have seen in most applications and most licenses. But the proposed condition is quite significantly longer and more thorough. Is that something that you've taken to proposing in all applications, or is it something that's become much more specific for this one in particular?
It is. Yeah, so that's a really good point, because I think you raised the one there in relation to the staff training. This is a really challenging environment and it's very dynamic. So as has been highlighted earlier, summer to summer, it's changing. There's very few places that change that much and that drastically. We've gone from having a major incident one year, following on from a year with nobody on the beach, and then now we're sort of returning to what I think normal might look like, if that's something that we can all start predicting, which we're not very good at doing. So when it comes to staff training, and to focus on that, making sure that staff are properly trained. Some issues have come up recently during hearings and with certain premises that have failed, if you like, where we found that the training that they've been given, whilst it's met the condition on their license, i.e. they must be given some training, the quality and frequency of that training has become an issue, something that we don't want to continue to repeat moving forward. So that's certainly the type of area that we look to change and look to improve on constantly.
Any supplementary, Councillor Johnson, or are you content?
I am content. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm looking to Councillor Burton. There's nothing that's come out of that, Councillor Burton. So I'll demur now to Mrs. Palmer with regard to a question I raised, and then you wish to raise a question in order to assist us. and it was around the business of the beach. Thank you, Mrs. Palmer. Your opportunity now to ask questions of Sergeant Gosling and Mrs. Rosales. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom. Firstly, can I support Sergeant Gosling on what he was saying about the conditions? And having started from a premise where we were trying to replicate the licence because of the variation request, we were extremely grateful to Sergeant Gosling for recognising that as this was a new application, he would accept conditions being tailored and being proportionate to the application, which is the reason you have what I hope is a very much more comprehensive, relevant and appropriate set of conditions before you now. Ma'am, with regard to your question, hopefully I can remember what that is, but the question I was going to ask Sergeant Gosling before he lost his sound was about the Air Festival and whether, as I understand it, that was probably one of the busiest times that you experience on the beach. Would that be a fair comment?
Yes, it is probably the busiest time of the year, I would expect, for the beach.
Thank you very much. And yet during that time, the license that was granted to Sunset Beach for the last couple of years had the ability to have off sales until 11 p.m. without any restriction on those off sales other than the usual legal restrictions, of course, and that there were no reported incidents as a result of those off sales being allowed to take place from the premises, and that was during the busiest time of the year.
Could you clarify that that's the case, Sergeant Gosling?
Yes, it is. So Bournemouth Air Festival is a really busy period for us. It's a great showcase of the beach area, and we do expect huge numbers of people to come to the beach and enjoy the beach and the businesses and all the facilities we have to offer. And in response to that, the senior management team do provide a significant uplift in policing resources during that weekend. So it's a number of officers who are engaged in all sorts of activities, from marine duties out on the boats, which provides a high visibility presence there, but also through to foot patrol, armed police, all manner of policing. And that is really the reason why, when it comes to relaxing those provisions during the Air Festival periods, we know that there will be an extensive uplift in policing to hopefully try and mitigate some of the concerns that might come up. And we do know that high visibility policing does prevent crime. It's been that case all the time, and we do try and endeavour to achieve that as often as we can. But naturally, it's difficult to sustain throughout the whole summer period. So hopefully that provides an answer and a bit of context as to why Dorset Police were more inclined to support the businesses with regards to extended provision during the Air Festival period.
That's useful. Thank you for that extra information as to the uplift which is in there. Mrs. Palmer, you still have the floor. Any further questions?
Yes, indeed, Ma'am. With regard to your concern over the SIA condition, would it assist you if the condition read that there would be one member of SIA on duty during half terms, bank holidays, school holidays, and weekends? These are regarded by the operators as the peak times when they would almost certainly be looking to have at least one member of staff on duty. There is, of course, a risk that you might get a wet weekend and that there would be a complete waste of money, but that at other times we could fall back to the condition as drafted. That is to say that if the risk assessment showed there was a likelihood of there being 75 or less attending, that an SIA would not be necessary. As you've heard, the operator does have a large security company, Aegis, I believe it is, which operates not only at Sunset Beach, but also at Aruba and West Beach. So there is the ability to call an SIA supervisor in at very short notice, which is an unusual and helpful ability, which may not apply to other units with a similar condition. Does that help you at all?
Sergeant Gosling?
I think any opportunity to be confident as to the SIA provision. I know that we do have many operators in that I know would work hard to focus on crime and disorder and to mitigate the concerns around that through risk assessments. But this area is particularly sensitive, as I think is agreed by everybody, and any conditions that would provide a minimum standard of SIA provision or a minimum level of SIA provision would be most welcome by Dorset Police.
And it's something that the subcommittee will take as an offered condition. In fact, it's offered condition number 2, members. So we'll take those in turn as well. Any further questions or anything else you'd like to raise, Mrs. Palmer? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. We've obviously heard what you have said about your concern over the off sales. My client remains completely confident that not only would they be able to control it effectively, but that it would in fact assist with the crime and disorder on the beach. But we hear what you say. Would it assist you if the condition was further curtailed to off sales being limited to just 1 drink per person, coupled of course with the ABV condition, which they certainly won't be bound by if they go and buy it from the off licenses in the town?
Again, your comment, please, Sergeant Gosling, and the subcommittee will also consider that condition. Thank you for its offering, Sergeant Gosling.
I'm grateful for that that amendment to the condition, but unfortunately, the off sales element onto the beach, certainly from the perspective of the local inspector, Inspector Thompson, he's absolutely certain that it would be very, very difficult to manage any off sales from this premises into that particular area of the beach.
Thank you.
Is there anything else?
Mrs. Palmer, you have the floor.
Sorry, Mum, I was just taking instructions. I don't think we have any further questions for Sergeant Gosling. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Are there any questions of Mrs. Rosales with regard to licensing officer? Mrs. Palmer?
No,
None at all, Mum. Thank you.
Okay, right. Questions of her. So, Mrs. Jardim, do you have any questions for Sergeant Gosling?
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, just before we go into summary, are there any burning questions, members? This is quite a complex application, some very thorny issues that we have to consider in great detail. So if there's anything that you would like to raise now, please do so. Has anybody on the floor? No, we're all so content, right? As long as we're all happy that we've all had the opportunity to raise all the questions that we so wish and glean those answers in order for us to precipitate our decision making. Okay. Thank you for that note, Linda. So it's now an opportunity for all parties to sum up. So we will start with the party that went last, and that's you, Sergeant Gosling. Your summary, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Having spoken very recently and hopefully answered everybody's questions, I don't have a great deal else to say, other than really to focus the attention of the subcommittee members, please, to the pertinent points of ensuring that there is adequate SIA. carefully and being cautious around the removal of the restrictions requiring the premises to be a restaurant. We feel that if not managed correctly, will certainly lead to the site being used as a destination for being wet led, essentially, and that is something that we do feel conflicts with the existing use of the site and the surrounding area, and that is the use of the beach for the public, including and mostly for families. And then finally, that last, as the chair quite aptly describes, a thorny issue, and that being around the off sales provision. We've looked, and I'm grateful for the efforts of Mrs. Palmer and Mr. Piovan in trying to come to an agreement in this matter, but unfortunately, those for us, and having consulted with the inspector for Bournemouth, they're the issues that remain of significant concern to us, and we'd be grateful for the subcommittee's support in supporting us with that, in advance of our efforts of, once again, no doubt, a further challenging season for 2023. And I've got nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. Mrs. Rosales, would you like to say anything?
No, Chair, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Palmer, your opportunity for summary, you have the floor.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll keep it, you'll be pleased to hear, very brief. My clients are very keen to continue to support the council's innovative approach and its vision for a broad range of vibrant facilities on its beaches with the Sunset Beach Club, but it's sadly unlikely to be able to do so because of viability issues if the licence granted remains tied to restaurant conditions. The applicant has clearly demonstrated very full controls and commitment to the licensing objectives, and has shown a past record of extremely good operation. In the very unlikely event that the police are not satisfied with the operation, then they have several enforcement processes available to them, including review. We ask you to kindly grant the application on the terms and conditions now sought, with the additional condition concerning the availability of food that has been offered, the amended offer of condition on the off sales to 1 drink per person, and the amended SIA condition. Thank you, ma'am. Unless you have any questions or comments, that is the case for the applicant.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the summary of those conditions offers. That's extremely helpful. Mrs. Jardim, do you have any thing in summary that you'd like to add?
I have nothing else to add. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. So if everybody's so content, I always like to have an understanding that everybody's had the opportunity to say what they want and has put their point across, and that our members have asked all the questions. I'm not seeing any hands, so I will see we are so content. So I'll now conclude the hearing. The subcommittee will now adjourn in private with our legal advisor and our clerk, and we will deliberate. A notification of the subcommittee decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations, which is today, Wednesday, the 18th of January. And notification decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate, but I would just ask our legal advisor, please, Mrs. Cole, if you would advise us with regard to right of appeal, and then we will all depart. Thank you, Mrs. Cole.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there will be a right of appeal to any decision that is made today. That appeal should be made to the Dorset Magistrates Court. Details will all be on the decision letter and should be made within 21 days of receipt of that confirmation.
It just remains for me to thank everybody for attending today, and I would just ask that everybody except our subcommittee members, our legal advisor and our clerk now depart. And thank you so much for attending. Good morning to you. In fact, yes, it's just good morning. It's 10 to 12. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you, Chair.
Thank you.